So why don't we start off with that question? What is at stake in these midterm elections, and why do you think it's more consequential than it normally is?
This is an important midterm for several reasons. President Biden has very, very narrow Democratic majorities in both houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. If he can hold those, he can continue to pass legislation, get judges confirmed, govern relatively unimpeded. When the opposition is in charge of one of those houses, you have investigations, you have legislation that you can veto, of course, if you're president, or stop in the other house if you control that, but that still creates much more a conflict, a much messier situation for a president. Sort of where the country is on the biggest question of our time domestically here in the U.S., which is, where is the country on Trumpism, that kind of populist right-wing authoritarianism, which didn't quite come out of nowhere, but seemed to come almost out of nowhere 6, 7, 8 years ago, and now seems to command the support of half or almost half of the country.
A lot of people are pushing the panic button in a sense because, as you said, Trump is on the ballot, democracy is on the ballot. Would you agree with that, or what would you say to that?
I see these election deniers running for Senate and House and governorship, people who do not only deny 2020, but might well deny the results and seek to subvert the results in 2024. I see people propagating the big lie and engaging in what I regard as pretty terrible demagoguery, and I sort of am a little shocked and distressed that there's not a more robust repudiation of them. On the other hand, to be fair to the voters in Pennsylvania or Arizona or Ohio or all these states, they're selecting a senator, they're selecting a governor, they're not thinking the way a pundit sitting in Washington is thinking about the overall sort of meaning of this. You've got to be somewhat distressed that the country as a whole is not as alarmed as you are. Now, maybe that's okay, and maybe, it's not the end of the world if the off-year elections go a little bit in the other direction. But the democracy, people like me can say democracy is on the ballot. I don't know that the huge majority of the American electorate thinks democracy is on the ballot, though.
We were getting ready to win this election.
Tell me a little bit about the Republican Accountability Project. You've been part of that. You're pumping money to defeat these more Trumpian candidates. Tell me more about that and why you feel that's something that needs to be done.
The country is very evenly divided, which means 3, 4, or 5% of Republicans defecting from the Republican candidate can make a big difference, maybe a decisive difference. And indeed, in 2020, we ran Republican voters against Trump. And so we're trying to do the same thing in 2022, especially focused on the Republicans who are most like Trump.
I say it all the time, right? I think the election was stolen from Trump.
2 in 3 Republicans still believe the big lie that Joe Biden is not the legitimate president of the United States.
Who are willing to deny the results of 2020, indicate they may not simply go along with the results this year or in 2024, who are making the most demagogic, mean-spirited, nativist sorts of appeals. And we'll see if voters are as alarmed by the prospect of having one of those people as governor or senator as they were in 2020, alarmed by the prospect of having Trump.
How difficult is that for you? I know you've been a lifelong Republican. I know you voted, for Biden last time around, and I know you're trying to get the message out that Republicans have to find themselves again. But how difficult is this for you?
As an American, I just can't believe where we are. I guess I really do feel that dominates everything. It's not so much, gee, I'm a conservative and I'm disappointed in conservatism, though I am. It's not so much, gee, I'm a Republican and I'm disappointed in the Republican Party, though I am. It's, what is the future of this country if we go down the path we're going down? There's more extremism than there was 2 years ago. Trump's losing the presidency and then the disgrace of January 6th didn't break the fever or pop the bubble or whatever metaphor you like.
If I were to explain to Canadians why this is more consequential, how would you explain it?
I do think liberal democracy, constitutional democracy, the rule of law are on the ballot. Maybe Democrats haven't done a good enough job of making clear they're on the ballot. Maybe it's hard to get voters to focus on that in a midterm when there's inflation and a million other things going on. There'll be an election in 2024 where maybe this becomes more obvious. But I do think Yeah, again, I think this. So I don't think this result will give us an answer. I'd be very surprised if on November 9th, the day after Election Day, we could all sit back and say, "Oh, okay, well that threat to democracy is over." I'll be very surprised, on the other hand, if on November 9th we sit back, we sit up in alarm and say, "Oh my God, democracy is doomed." Neither is going to be the case, I think. But I think the bad news for those of us who care a lot about fighting for American democracy is that we haven't made as much progress as I would have hoped we would have made in beating back the threats.